Long before I had my SawStop cabinet saw, I used this rigid contractor saw. And it was a good saw for a lot of years, but one thing that was always really annoying is that the rip capacity was only good to about 25 inches. So if I wanted to cut anything wider than that, especially if the keep piece and my offcut piece were both at that 25-inch mark or greater, I'd have to get a little creative. Today we're going to ditch the factory fence. We're going to secure this ledger to the end of the table. We're going to use it as a guide rail to completely unlock the full potential of our contractor saw. Now, I realize that every saw table is different, and that's where you might have to get a little creative if you do this, but the rules are going to be the same for every saw. We want this ledger installed on this end, and we want it parallel with the blade. Now, depending on the saw, you may not even need to install this ledger. If the edge of your table is straight and smooth as is, you can skip this step. But a lot of contractor saws are not exactly manufactured to the highest standards. So if you have a rough or wavy edge, you're definitely gonna need to do this. And the ledger itself can be made out of whatever you like, so long as it's something that won't flex and conform to the imperfections in the table's edge. I milled my piece to the exact dimensions of the table edge. I clamped it into position flush with the surface of the table, and I drilled a couple of holes to accept 1/4-20 screws and nuts. You just want to make sure that you use tapered screw heads that will sit flush or just below the surface. Once it's installed, raise the blade all the way up and measure the distance from the blade teeth to the edge of the ledger, both at the front and at the back of the blade, and confirm that both measurements are the same. If need be, you can shim out one end with strips of masking tape or even thin washers until the measurements equal out. When it's finally parallel, make a note of that measurement. This measurement should never change, so write it down on the saw somewhere so you don't have to re-measure down the road. Okay, so let's just say that I want to cut this piece of OSB in half, and for whatever reason, a track saw or a circular saw isn't an option. It's longer than 50 inches, which means I can't cut it in half from either direction because that'll exceed my 25-inch cut capacity. With the good side of the material facing down, measure over to where you want to make a cut. Then back measure the number that you just wrote down on the saw a second ago and make an X just to the left of it. Grab a straight piece of material to use as a guide, square it up to the line, and clamp it all together, making sure that the guide and the clamps are all on the X side of the mark. Simply flip the piece over and run it through the saw, using the straight edge and the table edge to guide you. If you apply your driving force both forwards and towards the blade at the same time, you'll end up with perfectly straight, clean cuts every single time. Now, trust me when I say it takes a heck of a lot longer to explain how to do this stuff than it does for you to actually just do it, but that's sort of the nature of learning and teaching. Also, there's a bit of common sense that needs to go into this as well. You don't want to be handling panels that are too big for you to pick up and manage by yourself in any operation on the table saw. I also made this super easy outfeed table over here to accept the panel once came off the back of the saw, but in my last video, I took a small sliver off a 5-foot by 3-foot piece and I was able to handle it. So again, you have to go with whatever you're comfortable with. Also, simple things like making sure your lightweight saw is bolted down to something solid, using a high quality blade appropriate for the task at hand, and also waxing your tabletop and or outfeed table can pay big dividends to not only this, but other ventures at the saw. If you set yourself upright, you could potentially cut down full sheets of material on a small contractor saw. That's all I got for you guys today. Thanks so much for watching as always. We'll see you in the next video.